This week on Dig Me Out. With your hosts, Jason Ziak and Tim Minichi.
Jay, we're back again with another episode thanks to our Dig Me Out Union on Patreon. You can help us make the next episode happen by joining us at dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com. And Jay, this week we have a union member joining us. He's brought his lunch pail and his and his hard hat.
He's been in all the meetings. His dues are all up to date.
His dues are
he's an active voting member.
There you go.
Everything's lined up.
Everything is lined
up. He had
up.
his ID card when he came in.
We're on target, Jay, you might say. Welcome back to the show, Andrew O'Connell. Andrew OC, how you doing?
Doing great. It's a pleasure to be with you guys.
I like your t-shirt, by the way. You got the triple fast action going.
I did kind of try and dress the part and even adjust the camera so we get a little bit of that in there. I'm really excited hey, triple fast. I know there's a lot of triple fast action fans on the podcast, so I'll just give. I know most people are probably not watching video, but the triple fast action came out, loving it. But that's not why we're here. Just repping it because I love it.
There you go. We love to hear it. And that's right. That's not what we're going to talk about. We are going to talk about a record that you selected. What was your pick last year? Do you recall?
Last year, and it doesn't even feel all that long ago, but it was Antenna, right?
Correct.
Antenna.
So are we moving in a different direction this year? Let's find out. Share with the audience your pick for your record for 2023.
For 23, I think most of my picks have been kind of all over the place where you might remember there's some Material Issue. There's there was Tom Waits, there was Eels, there was Guar even. But I think you'll find today's is in line with some of them. I chose the 91 album from Boston rockers, The Moving Targets.
Excellent. Not a band I was familiar with, but I'd heard the name because of the Boston scene. And, I
was going to ask if I wanted to. I planned on doing my homework, and unfortunately I'm that type of student who didn't, because I had listened to that episode when it came out, but I didn't go back to return if they were mentioned at all or not.
I don't think so. But on All Music, Bill Janovitz wrote their history, wrote their whole story of the band, which I had never seen that before. I know he's a writer, but so he talked about how big they were in terms of
history of the band.
They formed, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but they formed in 81. So this is a true post-punk band in the sense of coming out of the actual post-punk movement of the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. And were contemporaries of Husker Du. While Husker Du was recording with Lou Giordano, to make whatever it was, New Day Rising or whatever, they were the next band to go talk to Lou and record a record with them. They were on parallel paths, but in different parts of the country. And he just, Bill went into the whole history of the band and member changes and all that kind of stuff. And Jay, had you heard this band before or heard their name?
No. I mean, I've heard the term Moving Target, but totally unfamiliar with them.
Got it. How did you discover this record, Andrew?
It's funny. I want to know, and I don't know if we can prove this, but I want to know if I'm the first union member who's ever I came across this album. I was listening to this album for the first time when I got the ding that Dig Me Out had emailed me to choose this. I was listening to this album for the first time.
Okay.
And you know what? I had told you guys a little bit earlier. I have a bench of albums that I could always go to for the foreseeable future, but
Right.
I was giving this one a listen in the car, and as a responsible union member does, I set my email to notify me when Dig Me Out email. So
very good, very good.
it was I don't know, it was a great momentary, a good moment to actually have it all align, and
serendipitous.
that's a better way of saying it. But no, I had heard an interview from somebody from the Boston scene, Todd Phillips, who I believe is I believe he was a drummer from Bullet La Volta.
Mm-hmm.
Ken
Chambers.
What is it?
Chambers.
That's what it is. You're right. I'm probably anyways, Ken Chambers had played with in Bullet La Volta, and he was mentioning other influences from the Boston scene, and mentioned Moving Targets and how much he loved them. So it was just on a random listen for me that I went on, and the majority of Moving Targets, I think, output was in the 80s, and I don't know, their second album might have been 90. I'm not willing to commit to that one, but this one's from 90, and gave it a spin, and I thought it was worth discussing.
I can give you the info, the history of this band.
Clear it up, Tim.
So they formed in 81 in North Shore, Massachusetts, which I believe is in the general Boston area. And they were a trio. Original lineup was Kenny Chambers with bassist Pat Leonard. Chambers played guitar and sang. Leonard on bass and Pat Brady on drums. They recorded their first album with the aforementioned Lou Giordano was released in 1986, Burning in Water. After that, Leonard was replaced by Chuck Freeman, and then the band's second album, Brave Noise, came out in 1988. And I think this was the lineup for the second or for the third record. Let me double check. Yes, Chuck Freeman plays. Well, he plays bass on like most of the record, and then Pat Leonard plays bass on 4 songs for this album. And do you have the vinyl?
I do.
Wow.
No, you got that right. That Chuck Freeman plays bass the majority of the record, but original bassist Leonard is on 4 of them on the back half.
So this was released on Taang in 1991, and actually October of 91. So what was happening in October of 91? Was there any other records that came out around this time? Perhaps a Nevermind or a Use Your Illusion around this time. This was also produced by Lou Giordano with Ken Chambers. And then this was the last one with Pat Brady in the band. I think on the next record, it was Jay Arcari was on drums. And then the band broke up after their Take This Ride album in 1993. They reformed briefly for 2006 to 2007. And then they got back together, I guess, permanently in 2016. And they've put out 2 records. 2019, they put out Wires. And in 2020, they put out Humbucker. In 2018, they did an expanded reissue of a B-sides compilation, not a B-sides, but like a rarities demos compilation called The Other Side. It was originally released in 2016, but then it was reissued in 2018 with more material. And yeah, so they're kind of an active band. The lineup now is Kenny Chambers with Emilian Catalano, and Yves Thibault, or Thibault, not Thibault, Thibault. I think that's probably the correct pronunciation for that. On bass and drums. So what you could say is this is a Kenny Chambers project.
I'm actually really glad you said that, because several times when I don't want to say I rehearsed for this a whole lot, but I take notes and think about things that I want to say. And several times I've said Kenny Powers. You're not alone, Tim.
Dollar bills, y'all. Yeah. So that's the history of this band. We got some comments over at Patreon. We'll share the poll results for were the album better EP or decent single at the end of the episode. Here are the comments that we got. Kyle Bittner said, reminiscent of the softer side of Husker Du and the Replacements were the album, but that cover is trash. To which you said, in defense of the album cover, unclothed babies were popular in album covers at the time. You're not wrong. I mean,
the only mistake they made is putting a diaper on that baby.
Yeah.
They could have had a hit.
If only.
Right.
And they would have been sued many years later.
I mean, you might have had to dangle a $1 bill over it or something, but.
Right. Gavin said, I hadn't heard this, but I enjoyed it somewhat. The vocal is a bit weak, but otherwise enjoyable without a standout. I was struggling for a description until I read Kyle's, which nails it. Then he said, on repeated listens, I've switched to a worthy album. So he was at an EP, I think, and then went to a worthy album. So I guess that was a grower for Gavin. Will it be a grower for us? Let's find out. Jay, why don't you share with us one thing you liked about Fall from Moving Targets?
In a lot of ways, it feels like a earnest, kind of unassuming band. I even interpreted it when I was listening to it as like this might be a younger band or a early release. So it's interesting to hear it's actually not. I guess you could say it's probably middle career if they're still making records. But there's like there's like a raw energy to it, I guess, or spontaneity almost to not only how it's performed, but even some of the sounds. The bass sound that starts the record off is kind of that, I don't know, clanky, punky kind of bass sound. And, production wise, it's okay, but it also sounds, pretty raw in terms of, it's not overproduced or with a lot of layers or anything. So it has this punk rock energy, I think, at the heart of it. And then you get songs that are interpreting that in a kind of almost a Buffalo Tom or Replacements kind of way, where it's, pretty hooky, accessible. It has a little bit of an edge. The vocal is there to deliver the song. Got some, pretty decent choruses. I don't think there's any like major, like, punch you in the face kind of huge choruses, but it's melodic and there's some good, strong choruses. A good example is Answer is a good example of like a really cool, like driving melodic tune. There's some dynamics in there with the guitar shifting. Things get a little noisy, some cool effects, mixing in some chunky chords. So you kind of get this balance of, a little bit of muscle with some melody. for me, I think is probably the best example of a Replacements type riff. Like right away, that hook comes in on the guitar, and just reminds me a ton of the of something the Replacements write. Strong melody too in that song as well. But then there's another side of this band that can work as well, which is it sounds almost post-punk to me. So I hear like on something like Can You Blame Me, bigger dynamics, slightly more angular, interesting guitars, a little bit more aggressive. No Soul is another example where it's kind of sounds like Gang of Four. So it's like this other side of the band that's taking these metallic kind of like interesting riffs that are also kind of hooky and pushing the boundaries of like, what you can turn punk into. So those moments work for me as well. Now they can be very different. Those songs don't exactly sound like something like Fumble. But I think it shows like, to me, this sounds like a band taking punk and figuring out, different ways to interpret it and what to do with it. I think the last thing is it's interesting to hear there's two bass players on this, because I thought the bass was maybe, the low key star of the record in terms of just there's some really cool, interesting lines. You can tell it's probably a 3-piece because the bass is busy. There's a lot going on typically. In terms of trying to fill up some space, which I appreciate. Like it's just a fun listen if you listen to the bass on this record. I think Blind is probably the best example of just some really cool basic parts, but also filling in space, doing little runs and little accents here and there, and just I think really helping to make the 3-piece work. I think you typically in a 3-piece, if you got a killer bass player, you're in good shape. So it's interesting to me here there's two bass players on this, because bass was like of all the instruments the one that kind of popped out as being the most important in the band. So that's some of the stuff that worked for me. How about you, Tim?
Well, it's interesting with the songs that you highlighted. I had different sort of interpretations of what was going on for me.
Yep.
But I definitely highlighted the same songs. I think that this is a nice combination of the experience of Kenny Chambers having been in a post-punk punk / band for 10 years at this point, and streamlining or not streamlining, but taking songs that probably were a little punkier 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and then you get stuff like Answer to me sounded like Hold Me Up, Goo Goo Dolls. Like the melody to that almost sounded like There You Are from Hold Me Up, which was the single on that one. And Away From Me kind of reminded me of like Dramarama, that guitar lick, that like that was so catchy. It's so freaking catchy. So it reminded me of those like 80s. Hold Me Up is a 90 album, but of the evolution of post-punk incorporating some poppier sounds in the way that Husker Du for me has always been a challenge, because those first couple albums are so, the production on them is very you got to get used to it.
Yeah.
When you get into stuff later on like Candy Apple Gray and the ones that have a bit more polished production, you can hear Bob Mould integrating catchier melodies that he would then use in his solo work and in his Sugar albums. And that to me was like the parallel in terms of, this is when like Husker Du started to figure out like we can do this energetic, aggressive post-hardcore sound, but then we can also do Don't Want to Know If You're Lonely, or If I Can't Change Your Mind, like those kind of songs that Bob Mould can write that have these really, really good hooks, even though they're not pop songs in the same way that other bands would. I thought it was funny when the record started and it starts with that slightly under 2-minute intro, which is just instrumental. I was like, oh, is this going to be an instrumental post-punk album? Like, what's going on here?
Right.
Because I love that bass tone. Like, that's killer tone. It's just a lot, very MIDI, not MIDI in the keyboard sense, but just mid-range, chunky, kind of has a jawbox almost. I can imagine what's his name from I can't remember the bass player from Jawbox, but whatever it was, that's Kim Coletta. There we go. I had to go into the recesses of my brain to remember who the bass player was from Jawbox. But yeah, there's a lot of almost, I'm trying to think of a song. I think it was maybe No Soul, part of that song, and then part of I think it's Overrated, where there's some like big riffs here that almost sound like, there's like one where it's like a descending lift, like, and I'm like,
yeah,
that is not a post-punk. That's something else. Like, he's drawing on a different influence there that I can't quite pin down. But there's some really interesting guitar riffs here on this record that I think if you just, one or two passes, you're like, okay, this is late 80s, early 90s college alternative indie rock with a post-punk punk / vibe. And then you like listen to Kenny Chambers' guitar playing, you're like, there's a little bit more going on with this stuff than just 4 chords and bashing it out as fast as possible. So I think what Gavin experienced, I also experienced, where I was like, this is interesting. I don't know if I love it. And then as I listened to it more and more, it was like, okay, I'm picking up more things that are happening. I didn't love the straight up hardcore of like Fumble, but I think in the context of the record, it doesn't bother me as much as if like the entire record was that way. I don't know if you feel the same, like an entire record of would probably wear on me after a while. And even though this is a pretty short record, it's only 33 minutes. 33 minutes of that would probably be too much.
Yeah, I think at that point in the record, I was with you in that, I think that song, and was it Answer, where I was getting like, oh, this is like reminding me of early Goo Goo Dolls. Like, not that they sound like that, but they're playing with the same pieces. They're putting them together in a slightly different, or different way. But so that, I think something like Fumble to me sounds like a Robbie song in the early Goo Goo Dolls.
Yes.
Whereas then you get the melodic side with Answer, and you're like, okay, I get where we're gonna have this push and pull between like, are we a straight up punk band, or are we a melodic, rock band?
Yeah.
But then I think after that it starts to take a bunch of different other turns. But in the context of those two songs, that song made sense to me in that way.
Andrew, so this is a relatively new record for you, right? That's what you told us.
Yeah, about the past month or so, I've been listening to it pretty heavily. So I don't know if it's my turn.
Yes.
But I appreciate all the other bands that you've kind of mentioned, because I've heard them too. Like, yeah, I've definitely heard the Replacements and Bob Mould all over this, and Husker Du, and you mentioned Jawbox. I definitely hear all of those things. And even when we talk about things like the Goo Goo Dolls, I think in the past we've also talked like, the Goo Goo Dolls owe so much of their success to the indie rock success of bands like the Replacements, and or early Goo Goo Dolls, right? But some of the things that I really like about this one, like first, there's so much great guitar on this record, and you chimed on, but it's a one guitar band. It's a trio. There's so much where when he knows how to ring out and just let the bass totally take the front stage, but then immediately after he will rip a killer solo. The songs, most of them are pretty short. Even the ones that like they know how, if it's going to be songs like Overrated or No Soul, like where they're not the most complicated of songs, they know how to get in and get out really quick, so that they're not being any type of repetitive. But one of the things that I thought was really cool, I mentioned there's a lot of like guitar ring out, there's guitar feedback on a lot of this, but I think it plays really well with songs like Travel Music, the instrumental in the middle of the record, where it's really cool that on the second two instrumental tracks, they really let the drummer and the bassists shine and let them do their thing and really showcase their instrumentalism. But in terms of like pairing the guitar sounds on the record, so much feedback and ring out, you start hearing him play with, I'm pretty sure that's an ebow he's got to be playing with in Travel Music. And I'm just not sure of anybody who is doing, I mean, we're talking about different flavors of punk rock, but you're doing a 91 punk rock album and he's cool with, okay, well, we're going to do this ebow thing to bring this new type of atmosphere to these instrumental songs. And I think you hear it a little bit less on Awesome Sky on the backtrack of the record, but Travel Music is where I really go like, wow, you're doing something different. And they already were doing something different types of punk rock. And then, for a 91 punk rock album, experimenting with ebow on an instrumental in the middle of the record, and also just side A, side B, that's the end of side one. I think that's a really good end to that front side. But what else?
That's a good point. This is like you can think of that in terms of a vinyl sequencing, because this is just before like CDs really take off. So they're probably still thinking in terms of vinyl records when they're sequencing stuff.
Right. And then that brings up the first song on side B would be Away From Me. And how could you kick off a second half better than that? Because I think that we're like, I have no idea what they would have promoted as a single. This is Taang Records. Taang Records, famous in the 80s for, I believe they've produced some stuff from the Lemonheads, the Boss Tones, some others from the Boston scene. But, obviously this one did not gain much traction, but, if there was a single, I would say Away From Me is probably one that I would think would be there. But
yeah, if you're looking at Taang, there's like Mission of Burma, Lemonheads, Gangrene, Bullet La Volta, that's all around this time. Who else? Dinosaur Jr. singles, and I think and at some point they start doing, I guess it's around it's the same year, or around the same time, it's the first Mighty Boss Tones. So definitely a lot of interesting, I don't really know much about Taang. That would be a good episode for when we do those record label episodes, because they have a lot of interesting artists have had records out on that label. that we've talked about. But
And even then, like Taang stands for Teenagers Are Not Good. I looked that one up. Track one, for listeners, track one is called the Taang intro. It's an instrumental. It's, you mentioned, I think that driving bass is really cool. And I think the tone on the bass and on the guitar, there's a little bit more of an aggressive tone on the guitar that, it is not consistent throughout the record, but I enjoyed that. And I love it when a track one on a record is going to get you ready for the rest. So
I forgot to mention, not that I forgot to mention, I didn't know this. They actually put out a record this January as well. So they've had 3 albums out in the last 3 years. Or I think that's right. Or 4 years.
None of that, but over the course of the last maybe month or so, I've been looking at that. Like I missed them at their Chicago date and in 2022, and I'm looking at also like this is a fairly obscure band, I think. There's not a whole ton of Spotify plays, but I looked at like where they played at in Chicago on their 2022, and I'm like, that's not a large venue, man. Maybe 100, 125.
Wow.
I mean, I can't wait till they hit up. Right now, I think they're in Japan, actually. Whenever they tour the States again.
Jay, what doesn't work for you on this record?
I think it was mentioned in the comments from Patreon that the vocal is inconsistent. It's it can do its job in terms of just trying to just deliver some kind of melody, some kind of hook, not trying to overstate. But there's also times where it just doesn't quite sound confident. It's not unlistenable. It's not annoying. It's just, I think, one of those things where had the vocal been just a little bit stronger, I think this record could go to a different level. I think the other two would be maybe interrelated. Would be I struggled a little bit with the instrumentals. I think there's 3 of them on here. They felt like they were the middle ground of the 2 things that I said I liked about the band. So I'm liking the band when they're pushing things a little bit and getting a little bit more aggressive or angular. And I also like when they're, punk energy with melodies. And I felt like there's the instrumentals and then a handful of other songs that are kind of in this middle space, this no man's land of like, I'm not quite sure what it is. And the instrumentals, I didn't think that there was enough going on to kind of warrant why you would have 3 of them on the album. I could see maybe 1, but 3 felt like, to me, there's just not enough performance there or interest without having a vocal and a song around it. So didn't love those. I felt myself fading on those and fading on some of the other songs that had vocals, but also were in this middle ground of like, I think Once Upon a Time is a good example of like, it starts off with a really good riff, but then like the instrumentals, like you get kind of these generic riffs, like just repeating, alternating 2 chord riffs and a lot of changes that I'm not sure like where the song is going. it's just a little overwrought, like overthinking it a bit too much, maybe, or something. So I just think there's some material in here that's meandering or undefined that didn't really connect with me as well. Anything not work for you, Tim?
Yeah, I agree. His vocal is not my cup of tea, just in terms of, I feel like when the hook is there, it's just not strong enough. Like there's just, it is shouty at times, and there's just not, he doesn't capture the melody as strongly as like it needs to. Cause like we mentioned some really great songwriters in terms of comparisons: Paul Westerberg, Bob Mould, Johnny Resnick. If you want to put, I don't want to put him with those guys, but he's got a lot of hit songs. I feel like that there's a polish to them in their own ways. Like Paul Westerberg's not polished, but he knows how to deliver the line. And same with Bob Mould. Bob Mould has a very specific, unique voice, but he always finds like the way to get it, to refine it and get it exactly perfect so that it's a hook. And this to me feels like that second tier of bands where, like, you know, they're good musicians, other musicians like them, but there's just something that's keeping them from breaking through to the mainstream. And to me, it's like there isn't an obvious, I think it wasn't even in the comments, like there's not an obvious single. There's an obvious single from like musical standpoints, but there's not an obvious single from a lyrical melody standpoint. And that's what I struggled with with this band. Andrew, what about you? Anything not work for you on this record?
Well, I mean, I'll agree that the vocals are just kind of okay. You know, it's not where the album excels, but I think most of the musicianship and the songwriting carries and delivers my point. What I would say a negative, and I think this was brought up on it was brought up with our group. I do think it's kind of a terrible album cover. It's
wait, the logo at the top is different than the streaming version.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
The streaming version looks like the Jeff Ament font. It's like it's a handwritten in white. That's like a pink and like a different style.
Well, so the one that I have the vinyl for listeners here. I think, well, first of all, this came out October 91. Was Nevermind September?
Yeah.
Is that what it was? So these both have us. This would be a baby with a diaper. So baby diapers were popular at the time. It's just probably an unfortunate coincidence.
But that baby's in the dirt instead of in the water.
Well, then we're making an Alice in Chains reference. So
yeah.
But I think my biggest real issue with this is that, like, there's this brown, sticks and dried out grass type background with just the name of the band and the name of the album. Just there's not enough definition in between, that it just kind of is a blur.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how they chose dead grass versus purple and weird green, but
it's pretty awful.
And they don't. I mean, the back isn't much better. Like,
dudes at band practice.
It's fun. I've loved plenty of albums with terrible cover art. So, my biggest gripe, sure, the album cover's bad. One other thing, like, this is one of the things that's I did struggle hearing some of those lyrics. It's tough to get into some of those. Some of the songs, if you really can't understand what all the words are, because this is an album that's obscure enough that you Google it, I'm not going to be able to really pull up what he's singing. So for me, the three instrumentals too many? Maybe. I dug the instrumentals a little bit more than what I think you guys might have, but I mean, for me, and I think there's a lot of musicians who listen to this podcast. When I hear some instrumentals, I do kind of take it as kind of an exercise, like, okay, well, there's no vocals here. Where would I go with something like that? And I use it as an exercise to just kind of think like, where could it go? And I obviously, he didn't go there, or they didn't go there, but yeah, I enjoy it. They made me think. They broadened my aspect on that. Okay, but I don't know. That's what I have to say about that.
I do want to point out that if you go to Discogs, Taang has its own page where you can buy directly from them.
Mm-hmm.
You can buy this for $5 on vinyl directly from Taang Records.
Is that where you got it, Andrew?
Not.
Okay.
I think I spent less than 20, but it was an eBay purchase.
Got it.
I definitely should have. I should have done my homework.
I was curious, like, because I went to the
didn't need the repress. They're still selling the 91 stuff.
Well, that's the thing. I think so. The white label is the CD version in some countries, and the not white label with the white font that we're seeing on streaming, and it's a different color and font on vinyl. But that's not true in every, like, not every location around the world doesn't match that way. In some, the vinyl is a different is the white, and the pinkish purple is a CD. So I don't know what the decision was in terms of changing that. I feel like the white works better because it doesn't blend into the straw that's in the background, or dead grass, or whatever that's supposed to be.
No, I definitely think white would have worked better for both, because I don't think that olive green works either.
I do feel bad because when I looked at their page, I was like, I wonder what, if they have this, they're selling this. I wonder what other Taang releases they're selling. And there's a band called Maelstrom.
Okay.
From 1990. It's described as funk metal.
Oh my goodness.
And they're selling it brand new, sealed, from 1990 for $295.
All right.
I kind of want to buy it just to see what it sounds like without even listening to it, because, like,
it may be better just to imagine.
I mean, funk metal 1990. I mean, could we get some Mind Funk, some Biohazard? What's this going to be?
This would be Biohazard. Might be a good call with the name Maelstrom.
And this is their only record, so I kind of want to pick it up just for the sake of it, because
right, I'll put it in the hopper for a future vote.
So as we mentioned, this came out basically the same time as Nevermind. I would imagine that this got lost in the discussion of baby covers, album covers, which one was going to be dominant in the fourth quarter of 1991. But I mean, this is to me is like classic college radio, especially 1980s college radio, but going into the 90s as well. Like, this isn't getting played on any mainstream rock station other than maybe in Boston, their hometown. Yeah. Like, maybe they're playing them on the alternative station there. But I can kind of see why they would be, kind of the underground band that the people in Boston know, but are still, even though they're touring now, are not going to be selling out, like, anywhere. They're going to be playing clubs still. Which it makes sense. I mean, in terms of I think what our takes were on the record. So we should probably get into our final rating, Jay, of were the album better EP or decent single. Where do you land?
I'm gonna land at an EP. I really like the middle of this record. I would even keep Travel Music in there because it could be like a little palate cleanser. But I like start at track 3. Fumble, Answer, Can You Blame Me, Let's Keep Travel Music, Away From Me, No Soul, and end with Blind. So you'd kind of start with a punk song, you'd end with a fast punk song, you'd have an instrumental in the middle, and then the sandwich of all that is, some of the mix of both the, kind of the up-tempo driving melodic stuff, and then a couple of the more angular, slightly more, adventurous post-punk things. And I think that would be a pretty good EP. Where are you at, Tim?
Yeah, I'm at an EP as well. I would completely rearrange this. So I'd keep Answer, Can You Blame Me, Away From Me, No Soul, Blind, Overrated. And I would actually end with Only Life of Fun. Not Only Life of Fun, sorry. Taang intro.
I was going to say that was going to be a hot take there.
No, I would end with Taang intro because I just think like ending it with 2 minutes of just rock and chaos would be a fun way to end the record, or end the EP in this case. So, but it's a nitpicky thing because it's such a short record to begin with. It's only 34 minutes, like I said before, 34 minutes. So, but I do think in terms of the two songs, Overrated and Fumble, which like really go hard for the hardcore, I think Overrated's got the cooler riffage, and that's why I think I would keep that one over Fumble. So, Andrew, where do you land?
I'm at a worthy album. I really liked a whole lot of this. It hasn't really left my, I was about to say disc changer like I was driving in 96, but it hasn't left the Spotify or the record or the record player behind me for a while. I've said a lot of the things that I like about it, and some of the things that I worried a little bit, like, is this going to be a little bit too derivative of Husker Du? Is it going to be a little bit too much on the influence of the Replacements? But like, I felt, especially like when we got into some of the more, especially some of the heavier guitar playing, I felt like the guitar solos in that intro, or when he can really shred. Not that Bob Mould can't, but I thought that you could kind of hear the influence of him playing in a side project, Bullet La Volta, which is much, much heavier. Mm-hmm. You could really hear that type of influence taking it in another direction. So I'm at a worthy album, but hopefully we can all agree that it can join baby covers of the Round Table, a future Round Table with baby covers.
I like that idea.
Mind, Boy Named Goo.
Oh yeah, we bringing it back around to the Goos. To the Goos. I don't know. I got into very Christopher Walken territory there. The Goos.
That happens from time to time,
It just does. It
comes to get you
every once in a while.
He just reaches up and grabs you.
It does. We'll save the baby Roundtable for maybe episode 666. That would be.
Oh my gosh.
We might be tempting the fates with that one. We might.
What number is this one? This would be.
This is 654.
Wow.
So we're closing in on 666.
Wow.
Mother. Demon Thrall Sweat Live 666. That's might be the option. Tell your children not to come my way. What your children should do is be a patron like Andrew by joining us at dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com. That's how you pick these records.
Yeah, don't sign up for yourself. Sign your kids up.
Yes, it's a longer term investment. Because then they can take over payments when they get their paper route or their milk delivery.
They can use their phone, but then you just lock it down to only work with our Patreon page and Discord.
There you go. Lock it in.
We'll educate them on music.
What was that, Andrew?
What was the final vote on the Patreon?
Thank you for reminding me. Worthy album 80%.
Nice.
Better EP 20%. So the majority of the folks, they're on your side, Andrew.
And I love that there was it Gavin gave it a little time.
Yep.
I love that.
Sometimes you gotta take a little time. And
well, it's, everybody's busy. There's a lot of music to listen to, so it's always nice to hear when
it's true
in 2023 that people are giving a new record enough time to actually like absorb it and appreciate it. So that's cool.
There's a lot of good music out right now.
There's just too much.
Well, and the problem is that there's also good music that we don't know about that was released 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I just heard some like Tchaikovsky piece on classical radio that the college station does, and I was like, what? I've never heard that before. That's cool. Kind of sounds like Star Wars.
Okay.
Like, hey, reaching far back, hundreds of years. I don't even know when Tchaikovsky was alive. It could have been like the 1500s. Was classical music a thing in the 1500s, or is it like the 1800s? Like, when does it even start?
I think it was before the 1800s.
Well, who's the first person to put together an orchestra? I don't even know that. And I listen to music every day. I don't know who's the first person to put together. I know I know things about rock and roll and like the first this and that and whatever, but like who's the first dude who's like, all right, we're gonna take that ye string section and ye horns, and we're putting ye together.
The oldest piece of classical music is 4,000-year-old Sumerian clay tablet. So
it did not come out on Taang Records.
Wait, so is it music? How do they know it's music? Is there music?
It includes
notes?
Instructions and tunings for a hymn honoring the ruler Lipit Ishtar.
Oh, is that what the movie Ishtar is about?
Maybe. Probably.
I don't think so.
Let's go with that.
Okay. Andrew, thank you for suggesting this record.
Somewhere between the 1800s and 4,000 years ago.
Okay, thank you. All right. Oh my God.
When does it get a re-release on vinyl?
Somewhere between 100 and 4,000.
Will that Sumerian chanting be available around Record Store Day? Will they be doing a special re-release?
That would be kind of awesome.
180 gram vinyl
on a 180 gram tablet.
180.
Sumerian.
It's a clay disc.
Wait, don't use your normal needle for this.
No. You tear the shit out of that.
You have to get this special chisel. That's how you listen to this record.
For real, to be safe, just on Spotify.
There you go. Is it on Spotify? Do they get residuals?
I think that's in public domain.
Oh, okay. They didn't get the Disney exception.
No, the Sumerians do not get a Disney exception.
They must not have a good entertainment lawyer then.
They certainly don't.
I was trying to say thank you to Andrew for being a member of our union and being a part of the community. Love chatting with you on the board and having you on every year. And I like when you come because we don't know where you're going with these, as we can tell from antenna to guar, which is a pretty wide range of musical options.
That span, I like a lot of things, and to tell you the honest truth, I'm always gonna wear that guar album review proudly, if I've never listened to that since. So. I mean, context. That was it was a Halloween episode, right?
Sure, right.
So I thought that was appropriate for the time, and but I mean, I had a good time doing that too. So
excellent. Well, we want to tell people the Discord that I just mentioned. You get that by going to Patreon and becoming a member. You get access to an exclusive Discord where we don't talk about secret documents that the government has. On our Discord, we talk about demos by Catherine Wheel and what the latest King's X side project is coming out, and things like that. So
the really important stuff.
The truly important stuff. I saw somebody, I don't have it up now, but they're posted. There's the Soundgarden is like made up with his widow, so we might be seeing some new Soundgarden material. I don't know if it was finished, or like what state it was in, but it sounds like there was new recordings.
Yeah, I made it sound like it was maybe vocals were done, and we're going to hear some complete music at some point.
I mean, I guess if you get the vocals done, that's kind of the most important thing, because you can always retrack guitar and
Yep.
So
exciting.
Yes. So Patreon gets you to the Discord. It also gets you the opportunity to vote in the polls, like the one for this episode, or for our monthly tournament of death. 27 albums enter, 1 album leaves. Suggested by going to digmeoutpodcast.com. Anyone can suggest. We get them, they roll in every day, and our intern has to take them every day, put them in the line. The line keeps growing, but then it keeps shrinking, because every month 27 albums are sacrificed to the review gods, and one only makes it. So digmeoutpodcast.com, suggest an album. It's also where you go to sign up for the box newsletter, which is delivered each week with a review release calendar of new albums, books, movies, documentaries, TV shows about 80s, 90s, and aughts music, plus reviews of 2 new releases. Just had recently, I listened to on the same week Thomas Bangalter's Symphonies, it's an orchestral album, and then I also listened to Overkill, which is a thrash metal band. So we're covering a wide swath of music.
Well, it's a big umbrella.
Yes,
we have here.
I try to go to extremes, like Billy Joel in the song "I Go to Extremes." I also go to extremes by listening to a lot of death thrash metal that I've never listened to before, and then balance that with like singer-songwriter acoustic guitar or orchestral music or trip hop. Just try to go in the complete opposite direction. So you never know what you're going to get. So roll the dice every week. I don't know how many sides, maybe an 8-sided die. Is there a 7-sided die? It would seem like 7 days of the week you'd need 7 sides, but there's no such thing as a 7-sided die. It has to be an even number, right?
Yeah. I that's a physics question or a D&D question, and I'm not.
Well, I don't know. I'll have to look. I'll have to look at my D&D die, or my daughter's D&D die. She is the player now. We just went to the store and went to the Dragon's Lair, which is a store here. 7. Oh, you can?
Yeah.
The store here that specializes in Dungeons and Dragon and Warhammer. So we went to that, and she got some die. Anyway, lastly, Apple Podcasts is where you go to leave positive feedback about this program, brought to you by Taang, the drink, not the record label. Taang, it's the drink of astronauts. For Jay, I'm Tim. We're out. We'll be back next week with another episode of Dig Me Out.